Was I wrong to tell a guy the real reason I didn't want to date him? I told him it was because he's super picky about food. He only eats certain things and doesn't like trying new foods. My friend is letting me use her tablet to ask this question because I don't have a Reddit account and don't want to make one. This isn't my account, it's my friend's. So, here's what happened. I'm a 28-year-old woman and I met a guy named Jake, who's 30, on a dating app. We seem to click. He's funny, smart, and we have some things in common. After texting for a couple of weeks, we decided to meet in person for dinner. Just to give you some background, I work as a sous chef, and food plays a big role in my life. Where I come from, sharing meals and trying new foods is a big deal. It's not just about eating, it's about connecting with people. Food is a way for me to bond with others, and it's important to me both personally and professionally. Our first date was at a nice Italian place, and that's when I started to notice something weird. Jake asked the waiter a million questions about every dish on the menu. When it was time to order, he chose the simplest thing possible, plain pasta with just butter. No sauce, no extra toppings, but just plain noodles and butter. I thought it was strange, but I figured maybe he just wasn't in the mood to try something new that night. We went out again, and I suggested trying sushi. But Jake made a face and told me he doesn't eat seafood or raw food, so we ended up at a diner instead. And guess what? He did the same thing, asked the waiter a million questions about every item on the menu. Finally, he orders a plain cheeseburger, but not just any cheeseburger, just the meat, cheese, and bread. No toppings, no nothing. I'm starting to see a pattern here. As we kept dating, it became really clear that Jake was super picky, not because of any food allergies or medical issues, but just because he didn't want to try new things. He wouldn't touch sauces, spices, or veggies, only super basic foods. Every meal was a struggle, and he'd even make faces or comments about the dishes I loved, which felt really disrespectful to me, especially since food is such a big part of my life and culture. The final straw came when I invited Jake to a potluck dinner at my colleague's place. It was a big event with tons of homemade dishes from different cultures, exactly my kind of thing. But when we got there, Jake looked super uncomfortable. As we went through the buffet line, he barely put anything on his plate. He kept saying things like, "This looks weird," or "I don't want to eat anything with too many ingredients." It was like he was afraid to try new foods. I was mortified. My colleagues and friends had put in so much effort to make all these delicious dishes, and Jake was basically rejecting them. He barely touched his food. And then he whispered to me that he was going to sneak out and grab some fast food because he couldn't eat this stuff. He left the potluck early, and I was left making excuses for him. It was so embarrassing. That's when I knew it was over. Food is a huge part of my life and culture, and I need someone who can appreciate that. But Jake just wasn't that person. So I decided to break up with him. To spare his feelings, I told him I wasn't ready for a serious relationship right now, instead of saying it was because of his eating habits. But Jake didn't accept the breakup and kept contacting me, demanding to know the real reason. After a week of his persistent texts and calls, I finally gave in and told him the truth, that his very picky eating habits were a huge problem for me, and I couldn't imagine a future where food wouldn't be a constant source of stress. Jake was furious. He said I was shallow and that it was stupid to end things over something as minor as food. He claimed I was making a huge mistake and that I was giving up on a great relationship over something that shouldn't even matter. Now, I'm left wondering, was I wrong to tell him the real reason I didn't want to date him?
Story 2.
The time I almost lost my job over a bad cup of coffee. So, to give you some background, I used to work at a cafe that had a big storage area in the back. I worked in the cafe, serving customers and making drinks, while this annoying guy was in charge of the warehouse. One day, he did something that really upset me. He slapped me on the butt. I was definitely not happy about it. Unfortunately, the place I worked at was a toxic workplace controlled by a group of guys who looked out for each other, no matter what. They were really manipulative and cruel. When I tried to report the incident to HR, they didn't do anything to help me. Instead, they tried to cover it up and make it seem like it never happened. So I was assigned to make the same manager's coffee, the one who had slapped me. I was still angry, so I made his coffee really badly on purpose. I burnt the coffee, burnt the milk, and added way too many sweeteners, 10 to be exact. I was seeking revenge. I'm also a survivor of sexual assault, and unfortunately, my attacker got away with it because there was no evidence. But this time, I wasn't going to let another man disrespect me and get away with it. So when I got called into a meeting with my manager and HR about the coffee incident, I pretended like I had no idea what they were talking about. They both knew I had done it on purpose, but they couldn't prove it. And honestly, I didn't care. Anyway, do I regret what I did? No, I don't. Would I do it again? Absolutely, in a heartbeat. I'd do it all over again if I had the chance. And if you're curious, I can tell you about the consequences that guy faced afterwards. Some background, he was a 50 to 60-year-old man, and I was just 22 to 23 years old at the time. Anyway, for some reason, the higher-ups decided not to single him out specifically for his behavior. Instead, they chose to address the issue by targeting all the men working in the warehouse, not just him. After what happened, the management made some changes. The guys from the warehouse were no longer allowed to come into the cafe and hang out near the coffee machine while we worked. But instead of just dealing with the one guy who was the problem, like I wanted, they took it out on everyone. All the male staff from the warehouse had to attend sexual harassment training, which seemed unfair to me. When I reported the incident to my manager, I only knew the guy's first name, not his last name. But it didn't matter because my manager knew exactly who I was talking about as soon as I said his first name. Everyone in the workplace knew about the incident because news spread quickly there. Even after what happened, I kept hearing from others that he was still being creepy to young women working in the warehouse, apparently. The only reason he didn't get fired was because the incident happened just before a new law was passed that required companies to fire employees for sexual harassment. According to HR, they did everything they could ethically do, but it seemed like a weak excuse to me.
Story 3.
My ex has found someone new. I'm struggling to cope. On my profile, you'll see a lot of posts. You might think I'm pathetic, wondering why I'm so eager to hear from strangers. The truth is, I don't have many good friends who are there for me when I need them. I'm just trying to find ways to get through tough times. Please be kind with your words. It's been almost 2 months since my ex and I broke up. We split on July 5th. I'm a mess emotionally because I can't understand how someone who promised to marry me, start a family with me, and said they'd never love again if we parted ways ... is already in a new relationship after our 4-year relationship ended. It hurts me that he doesn't seem to miss me or care that I'm no longer in his life. His absence has a huge impact on me, but mine doesn't seem to affect him the same way. I know I shouldn't still have strong feelings for someone who cheated on me. What makes it even more painful is that his new girlfriend is someone he introduced to me as his cousin for half of our relationship. He later admitted she was just a friend he didn't want to tell me about because he thought I'd get upset. I did get upset, but only because he lied about her being his cousin and made me feel crazy for questioning it, especially since I remembered them flirting on Instagram before we started dating. I'm seeking advice on how to move on and stop hurting. My heartache feels so intense that it's causing physical chest pains. I've lost my appetite and can't eat. To make matters worse, I got accepted into my dream university but failed miserably because I didn't pass an exam. It feels like things will never improve.